Welcome to the KnotSkool YouTube channel. My name is Jason, and I am the creator of the KnotSkool. This video is taken from the KnotSkool's Loop Knots resource module as a small example of what you can find there. Now, let's have a look at the Bowline. The Bowline was first introduced in the knot section of Module 2. The Bowline is often described as a very ancient knot, and in fact, it is often one of the first knots taught in many outdoor programs. The Bowline is a type of knot known as a loop knot. Loop knots are knots that are tied to create a fixed, non-adjustable loop or multiple loops in a rope. There are two types of loop knots. There are loop knots that are tied at the end of a line and also midline loop knots. The Bowline is an example of an end-of-line loop knot. However, there are other Bowline variations, including the Bowline on a bite, which is a midline loop. The Bowline doesn't have any alternative names. However, there are various versions of the Bowline, and each of those variations has its own name for identification purposes. Within the structure of the Bowline, we find the same structure as the sheep end. In fact, we could consider that the sheep end is the foundation knot for the Bowline. However, the Bowline has many different variations, and so we can consider the Bowline also a foundation knot. Some examples of Bowline variations are the Cowboy Bowline, the Bowline on a bite, and the Eskimo Bowline, to name just a few. There are a few different methods to tie the Bowline. The most common way when we first learn it uses a moniker of a rabbit jumping up through its hole, around a tree, and then back down its hole again. So to tie the Bowline, begin by forming a loop. From there, take your working end and pass it up through the loop, then around and behind the standing part, and then back down through the loop again. From there, cinch up the knot. Another faster method of tying the Bowline is called the one-handed Bowline. And of the one-handed Bowlines, there are a couple ways to tie it. I'll show you the easiest. The trick to tying the one-handed Bowline is to position the working line so that it's between your index and your middle finger when you begin. From there, you simply trace out the path that the rope would take as you would tie the Bowline. There is another way to tie the Bowline, which I find quite interesting, and this time we begin by tying a noose. Once we have our noose tied, we then take the tail end and pass it through the loop, then cinch up the knot and allow it to capsize on itself. And there we have another Bowline knot. You can find the Bowline in use in a lot of different applications, including by arborists in boating and sailing, in camping, climbing, and home and garden applications. Practically anywhere you need a simple loop knot. Despite the Bowline having an excellent reputation, there is the danger that the Bowline could slip, especially when the knot is not loaded or when the knot's tied in modern synthetic materials such as Dyneema or Spectra. One of the easiest ways to make the Bowline more secure is to add a half hitch by simply taking the tail end and tying a half hitch around the one side of the loop. Backing up the Bowline will reduce the risk of the knot slipping when tension is lost. You can find the Bowline as knot number 287 on page 49, number 1010 on page 186, and number 1716 on page 295 of the Ashley Book of Knots. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to learn more about knots and the KnotSkool, then I invite you to come check us out. KnotSkool is the only dedicated private learning platform for learning knots, with a fraternity of knot tiers sharing their experience and their knowledge. I'll put a link in the description and at the end of this video so you can find us. I hope you come check us out. And thanks for watching.